That was close.
All right, we're live.
All right.
And
Good evening, everybody. For our not so normal Trained by Tech's live stream tonight, a little bit earlier than usual. So appreciate y'all joining us. For those of you that are used to the 9 p.m. deal, we're obviously a bit earlier. Appreciate you joining us. Very special event. Very thankful to be a part of this roundtable panel discussion deal. Anthony Williams, thank you so very much for allowing us to participate and host this and be involved. Very excited about the conversation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you explain what we're doing here and a brief introduction for the rest of the panelists.
awesome. Well, thank you guys for partnering with us. We're representing the Rocky Mountain Automotive Teachers Society, as well as CarQuest Technical Institute. And tonight we're having a roundtable discussion, a conversation about electric vehicles, both hybrid and battery electric. What we're trying to do tonight is not answer the where we should be teaching, the scope and sequence, but to have a discussion to bring the fringes together so we have a centralized idea. And we're going to hear from both sides, those who think that it's a waste of time and those who think that all we should teach is electric vehicle and everything in between. So we have our panelists here. Bryn, you ready for me to introduce them?
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
So we're gonna go around the horn, and I'm gonna let them give you a quick, brief introduction on who they are. Todd, you got the mic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Todd Hetherington. I've been an automotive teacher in Colorado for, I think, 29 years. I've also done some curriculum work for American Honda. I've been the Rocky Mountain Automotive Teachers Society president 3 times, and I'm back in that position now, and I was practically seamlessly the secretary from, I think, about 1994 or 5 forward. I'm in a really interesting position in that I retired. I taught at the Boulder Tech Center for 21 years and Brighton High School for 7. And I retired and did some teaching for Ames Community College and was writing a contract to do their curriculum development for hybrid and electric. And I was in a car crash and came down with cancer. And I'm doing really well, and I'm looking at going back to work in January. So I'm happy to be here to share whatever my views are as relates to high school and college, and how about just the fact that the Toyota Prius has been out since, I think, 1997.
Awesome. All right, Brad Pellman.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Pellman. I am a longtime shop owner in Boulder, Colorado. I am heavily involved in the industry. I've been in every portion of auto repair that you can think of, from car wash attendant to technician to now shop owner. I have a large shop in Boulder. I have about 15 employees. It operates on its own. I heavily believe in training. I am a big fan of every technician growing to become the best technician that they can be, and I support that, and will do everything I can to challenge my technicians and encourage them to get to that level. I am a strong advocate in the industry. I was the chairman for ASA for Colorado for about 6 years. I am currently on the board of directors for ASC, and we are a TechNet facility and have been, my company has been actively partaking in TechNet training since the early onset, and as well as any other training that we can find. I make my technicians go to, and we make events out of it and go to together. So that's kind of our background on what we do. Boulder does have a lot of electric vehicles and hybrids, and we're more than happy to see them. So I've got some experience with them and can let you know what I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Bryn Klein.
Good evening, everyone. Bryn Klein, owner of Assured Auto Works, which is an independent repair shop in Melbourne. We opened the company about 10 years ago. But like Brad, I love the industry, and I want to do I'll kind of borrow from Brandon Steckler here. He says this quite often: "I want to leave it in better shape than I entered it." And that's everything that we do with Trained by Techs, for that matter, kind of relates around that. That's a kind of a mission statement, if you will. So, very fortunate to be involved in a lot of areas in the industry. The more I get involved, the less I sleep, but the happier I get. So, that's me. Look forward to the discussion tonight.
Awesome. Brandon Steckler.
You're muted, Brandon.
Muted,
You're
Bob.
muted.
Sorry. How's
Never
that?
sounded better.
Better? Okay. Apologize.
He couldn't see the button.
Brandon Stecker, everybody. I've been a technician for just over 20 years now. Started off on the dealership side of the industry with OE training, and eventually found my way over on the independent side of the industry, and made plenty of mistakes and learned from them. And once I found myself in a position where I was able to give back, which so many have given me, I found that to be much more rewarding. So now I spend my days helping to give back to the industry. I'm a trainer with CarQuest Technical Institute and World Pack Training Institute as well. And like the rest of the panel here, we just want to keep seeing this industry moving forward in a positive direction. So thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. Jim Kokonis.
Jim Kokonis. I'm
a caveman, clearly.
Ma'am, pay attention, ma'am.
I'll change that for you here shortly. We'll see what you think. I'm a curriculum developer, senior curriculum developer with CarQuest Technical Institute. Still a technician at heart. I kind of came into mechanics from a different path. I was that academic honors path, foreign language, college bound person, and I'm like, I don't want to sit in an office, and so I went into the automotive field a long time ago, and some of you weren't in high school yet, probably, and I didn't know that I wanted to be a teacher until I was in my 30s, and the challenge of teaching made me sharper. So I know a lot of us like to say we'd like to give back. I love to teach as a way of sharpening my saw, and steel sharpens steel, and that interaction with the students is why I do what I do. So I'm very interested to see where this conversation goes and how I can contribute.
Thanks, Jim. Jerry Stewart.
Hey guys, I started this in 1980 is when I jumped into my first professional automotive gig, and I had basically became a service manager for a while for Chrysler, Plymouth, Jeep. I spent some time with Toyota, so went through the dealerships, owned my own shop for about 18 years, did national training for CarQuest and Napa for about 17 years. I've been currently teaching post-secondary for the last 10 years. I'm with Helena College in Helena, Montana right now. And I'm also part of CarQuest's development team. I am Jim Kokonis's junior development person. So I work on the same team Jim does, but out of Montana rather than North Carolina. So that's my claim to fame. And just started a grant for hybrid at my school. And so I'm in the process of putting together hybrid cars, electric cars, hybrid cars. In fact, trying to buy a Bolt EV right now, but they're under recall, so you can't buy one. And putting together a tool list and basically just trying to get our school and the workforce in Montana ready for hybrid electric vehicles.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, Richard Bach.
Hi, sorry about my video. My computer at the college doesn't have video, so I'm just I'm watching from my computer and talking through my phone. So I'm faculty and program director here at Front Range Community College. And prior to that, I ran 3 different shops for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And then before that, I worked for Mannheim Auto Auctions as a trainer for 14 years. And before that, I worked for GMC in their Technical Assistance Center in Detroit. And then I worked at several different independent shops and Owatonna 2 Company programming their scan tools. Been doing the automotive since 1983.
Awesome. You've been doing automotive since longer than I've been born. So,
I'm sure that made him feel real good.
Right? That's right. I love my teachers. I see on Facebook we got quite a few teachers in the chat as well as a lot of technicians. So we're going to get this party started here, and we're going to keep a central driving question, though the conversation may go back and forth and ebb and flow into tools and technology and things like that. We're going to keep, you guys will hear me keep trying to bring it back to our driving question, which is, in secondary and post-secondary education, what level of electric vehicle should we be teaching? In other words, we're looking at the scope and sequence for educators. What depth should we be going into in electric vehicles, both hybrid and full battery electrical? And what tools should we be doing? And this question came up from several different vendors looking at, why are they struggling with selling some of the equipment for training hybrid? So with that, I'll restate the question again, and we're going to open it up into the shop owner. So Brad, I'm going to give you the first mic open as soon as I repeat the question one more time for all of our guests. In secondary and post-secondary education, what level of electric vehicles should we be teaching?
So and the expectation is for what a shop owner wants to see when that kid comes to the door, right?
Exactly. If they're coming out of a post-secondary or secondary program.
Okay. Well, I would start off by saying I personally would definitely like to know that they have knowledge of hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles. Safety certainly is one of the main things. They need to know what they can touch and what they can't touch, and how to be safe around the vehicle. That's the starting point. They need to know basics about the car and how it operates. Entry-level people are going to be doing a lot of your servicing and stuff. They need to understand the car's capability. Like, it's not running when you put it on the lift, but if you didn't power it off and get the key away from it, you could have a car that fires up on you while you're doing something to it, and that would be a really bad thing. So they need to have that knowledge, or they're going to learn it right away when they're in our bays. I think they need basic knowledge of three-phase electricity, so that they understand how those motors and how that system works. I don't know that I need them to diagnose it. I don't think I need them to get it in depth. I just need them to know how to be safe around the vehicle and have an understanding of what the vehicle is. Because truly, when you start talking about repairing a hybrid vehicle or an electric vehicle, you're probably talking about a master technician. And that's not what that's not what we expect to get in our door on day one.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to slide it over into technicians with Brandon Steckler.
So the same question from a technician's aspect, correct?
That's correct.
So I would anticipate that the technician coming out of school should be at least well-versed in the safety aspect of a battery electric vehicle, hybrid electric vehicle, plug-in, what have you. They should be able to navigate their way safely, be able to place the vehicle in a mode where it can be serviced without anybody being in any type of danger. I still think, though, even though this student is in an entry-level position as a technician, I think they should be able to identify the main components of these systems and have basic fundamental knowledge of how they operate. Let's not forget the basics of electricity from the DC side either. Obviously, they have to know how that works to get into three-phase electricity voltage. So I really think, and I'll state it again, just like it was, like Brad had just stated, hybrid electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, these systems tend to be addressed by more experienced technicians. A lot of us started getting involved with them, and we've already had decades and decades of experience before we had our hands on them, where these kids, young men and ladies, are coming out of school pretty much still green, wet behind the ears, and they've got a lot to learn. So again, I really think they should have basic fundamental knowledge of how the systems operate in general, and at least be able to navigate their way around the vehicle safely.
Awesome. All right, Jim, I'm going to throw the mic to you.
Okay. I think, and this is a perception, and I'm not trying to be coarse or anything else. I think there are a lot of things that technicians are taught in programs today that they will never use in a modern shop. Legacy education that, although it has some value, more time may be spent on it than is beneficial in the shop now. And I can elaborate on that, but I don't want to spend my minute or two doing it now. And so I think if we take a incisive look at that, we can find time to add in some of these newer technologies, as long as we are staying around the concepts, the principles, and the foundations of them that sets the student up to build their expertise going forward. It's kind of like when I participated in an ADIS conference. Where do we put this? Everywhere. Everywhere it belongs. When you're teaching brakes, it touches on it. When you're teaching X, you're touching on it. So, you know, how are we going to teach a student brakes if they don't have a basic understanding of how a hybrid system is going to impact the wear and behavior of that system and the electronics that govern it? So to me, we've got to figure out where it fits, and we have to at least make them aware of all those different areas and how they interlace.
Nice. All right, Jerry Stewart, the mic's yours.
Well, I'll speak a little differently. I'll speak of what we do train in our school, okay? And I've been teaching hybrid for quite a few years at the post-secondary level. And so we probably get into it further than you guys think we should. We literally pull the transaxles apart. And of course, we already do manual transmissions and automatic transmissions. So as we pull them apart, there's nothing to them, you know? There's some, you know, sometimes there's some bearing preloads and things like that, and there's some in-plays and things like that that you have in a regular transmission. But we get into taking the milliohm meter and talking about turn-to-turn shorts and how to test them. And we test them with milliohm meters, and we talk about insulation breakdown, and we test that with a mega ohm meter. And then, of course, like Brandon said, the most important thing is putting these vehicles into safety mode, being able to go back and remove the orange outlet to get it in the safety mode, and how to put that back in safely, how to use gloves, things like that. And of course, we actually take the inverters on and off the vehicle. We go through all the scan data, so they get a really, really good look at hybrid and electric vehicles in our program. Now, we probably go further than what they need, but that's just our program. That's the way we address it. So they get a pretty good background as they're there.
Awesome, Jerry. Thank you, Richard. Let's hear your point of view on this question. Richard Bach.
Okay. Yes. Let's see. I was teaching at Lincoln for 4 years, and I was in charge of developing a hybrid electric class there. And I guess after taking several training classes on the hybrid electric, I think it's important to understand how the battery system works, the safety procedures, how to make sure you're in a safe working environment. I think we got to set a good baseline for the students, so when they go out there, they're not going into a blind. They got to understand how the systems like you said, interlace or work together and work safely on the systems, and how to test, like you said, how to test the different components using the different high voltage test tools. But I'm only can be on for another 10 minutes, and I got to have a colleague sit in for me since I'm currently teaching.
Nice, no problem. Well, thank you for being here, and we look forward to somebody else sitting in for you as well. Todd, give us your point of view on this.
In preparation for this, I sampled some other teachers, and the thinking is pretty similar, that in terms of adding really any level of what hybrid and electric technology is to high school level programs seems like it really ought to be limited, partly because of the safety issues involved and partly because of time and the technical pieces of it, to understanding the safety, understanding why things are encased in orange, and having a presentation of how the motors work, and that we've got inverters and that we have computer controls that synthesize everything the driver's trying to do or wants to do, between whether we're using a combustion engine and whether we're regenerating, charging batteries, all of that kind of thing. And then safing it. That's really a lot to try to fit into an automotive program, as far as any of the high school teachers that I've canvassed, and I feel pretty much the same way. One thing I'd also like to mention from my position is there's probably going to be some concerns from administrations and school districts about, well, what are we exposing these students to? So I think being very careful about whether to push that at high school, but also you get those really bright students who really ought to have that picture painted for them to wet their whistle. Once we're talking about post-secondary, as far as what we've been discussing and what our plans are at Ames is to add hybrid and electric to the program, and that you would only be eligible to be in those classes if you had graduated from the rest of the program, I'll call it all 8 ASE areas, diesel, whatever, or if you're working in the industry and you're coming back in for training.
Wow, that's actually pretty awesome to hear. That's actually a comment that I was going to bring up later from one of the TBT guys. Hey, Bryn Klein, let's hear your point of view from a shop owner's perspective.
Well, first and foremost, I just want everybody that's around that's not familiar with Trained by Techs. There are a bunch, just in case you see a face that hasn't been introduced, there are a bunch of us behind the scenes that plan on participating to some degree. So just to give you a heads up there. From a shop owner's perspective, it doesn't really differ much from Brad's, I don't think, maybe not at all. But I think it's wise to touch on mandates. This is why this conversation is so important right now, is you can see that obviously we're going to continue to go that direction with the more and more hybrids and electric vehicles on the road in the future. And it's definitely something we need to keep our eye on and focus on. So the term I want to use as a shop owner, I think it's about balance. So I look at this as integration. Now, you're wanting a shop owner's perspective. It's hard to do that without considering the reality. We only have so much time to prepare these people for the field. So when I say the term integration, I think basically because there's a balance, like Jim was referring to, we keep hearing about some of these, some of this curriculum that might be a bit dated, maybe, going into details in the depths of hydraulic brake repair and rebuilding hydraulic cylinders. And some of that stuff's obviously important to understand how hydraulics work, but we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. That, and, engine building may be another one. But with regard, if we were able to kind of retire some of that curriculum, we'll be able to allocate some more time toward this. But integration, meaning we still focus on the main systems of the vehicle, but we also talk about how it's different with hybrid and electric vehicles. So when they come to my shop, if they have all of that, I think we're golden. And I think the safety aspect is certainly one of the main things for new students or, recently graduates to come into my shop is that kind of fundamental understanding, and especially with an emphasis on safety.
Awesome, Brendan. Thank you. All right, I'm going to throw it over to the Train by Tech guys. Chris Martino, you got your hand there.
Yes, I do. I wanted to actually just comment on a couple things because I was listening. I had a couple questions because I have some feelings about this, and I'm with Bryn and Jim. There needs to be balance. Jerry, how long is your program that you host?
Well, they have to go through electrical 1 for 5 weeks, electrical 2 for 5 weeks, and then hybrid for 5 weeks. So it's a 5-week program just for hybrid when you get to it.
Okay, but the total length of your program.
2 years.
So it's a 2-year program.
2 years.
And you're taking people that don't know pretty much anything about vehicles and then putting them and placing them in the jobs.
Yes, in fact, what they do, we've got a kind of a unique program to where they go to school a half a day and they work a half a day. So they're in dealerships and or aftermarket shops for a half a day and at school a half a day. That's the way we run our program. So they get a lot of work experience while they're doing it.
So what I found is hybrids and electric vehicles extremely important. But I agree with what Brandon was saying. We need to know the fundamentals of how they work.
Absolutely.
But as far as putting a lot of eggs in that basket, I think it can go either way. I'm more in the conservative route with that. I think it's more important to teach this person going into the field to expect to learn what to expect when they go into a job. They're not going to go into a job taking apart hybrid vehicles. They're going to go into a job starting at the bottom, as far as what I know. And a lot of those issues, vehicles are interconnected systems. All right, with you could have a bad wheel bearing in the right rear of the car. You might think it's an engine noise, and you only learn that by experience. So I find with hyper focusing too early, it could lead people down the wrong way. I find a lot of this information needs to be built up over time, with an emphasis on hybrid if you want to go that way. But you got to be careful with putting too much time on something they're not going to see right away. And that's the only thing I would have to say about that.
And just a quick response: hybrid is the very last thing we do because you have to build up to it, and they got to spend time on torquing bolts and bolt fatigue and grading bolts. They need all the basics as you go along. So we actually went to a 5-week program instead of an 8-week program, and that way we were able to cover more subjects. And we thought by getting them in the field for the other half a day, and plus as they're in with the dealers, they do dealership training as well. We do training through Chrysler, Subaru, and Ford. And so they get a lot of stuff in that 2 years. They really do cover a lot of material. But you can't spend too much time with the basics, and I get that.
Hey, Jim, within the chat there, you had made a mention of something there that we referred over to Tesla. Would you mind repeating that for the group? Kokonis?
So thanks for calling me out on that.
I think it's an important point. So
I guess as I listen to this conversation, and a lot of you guys don't know me, Rich probably has more time with my monkey wrench level of throwing questions out. So I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this, and we're having a conversation like, oh, hybrid, electric, doing that at the high school level. And yet I can remember in the VOTEC program, we had an electricians section where these guys were working on 2-phase and 3-phase, and they learned to do it safely. And then the thought popped in my head. So we're saying we cannot take a person and train them to work on Tesla vehicles in a Tesla facility unless we run them through everything legacy on all the other cars. Is that what I'm here? And please, my voice is for conversational purposes here, but that's my brain thinking is like, is that really true? And are we looking at that the right way? So that's why I typed the comment out so I can remember it.
That's actually a really good point, Jim. Yes, if you're going to work at Tesla, you need to know how electric cars work. But there's a lot of other systems on that Tesla that you need to know how they work to also work on them. Not everything is electronic. And as far as I know, unless it changed in the past 2 months with the whole right to repair, Tesla does Tesla training only.
Awesome. I'm gonna throw it over to Rich. He's had his hand up for a while. It's losing some of its blue color. Rich Falco.
You're muted.
I got it. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Jim stole my thunder. Yeah, I understand, and let me add, I'm a CTI instructor, I'm a TBT guy, but I also taught in a technical school for 5 years. And yes, the administrators hear electric car and they go, oh my God, oh no. But if they ever saw half the stuff we were teaching the kids, they'd freak out. I think it can be added. I think that you can fit hybrid and electric vehicles into your NATEF guidelines or your curriculum, whatever it may be. Maybe if we spent less time rebuilding 350 Chevys, we could talk about hybrid motors a little bit. In the brakes section, instead of rebuilding master cylinders, how about we talk about regenerative brakes? So it can be worked into your curriculum. I mean, obviously there's parts that are separate, but I think we should be exposing the students to as much of that technology as possible as we go along.
Awesome. Brad, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to Jerry, I wanted to say, you know, the program that you've built, it sounds really great. I mean, it really sounds like your guys are going to learn a lot in that program. But from a shop owner's point of view, you're not going to have somebody come in fresh out of a program and let them go right to one of those cars and start working on it. The shop owners, we're waiting to see their level of confidence and their ability grow, and then we allow them to grow into their positions. And the smarter they are, if they come out of your program and they're track as a whip, they're going to move up our scale quickly, and they're going to get to their goals quickly. But you know, if they come in and great, you have all this knowledge, you went to this school, you got a high score, but I haven't seen you change oil all the way yet without having a leak or a comeback, so we're not going to move on. So that's the shop owner's position. So it becomes this discussion of, do I need that guy to be heavily trained in hybrid? I don't know that I do. Do I want him to get there? Absolutely. And then Jim, you said if you're only going to do electric vehicles, so let's say somebody was only going to do electric. I'm coming out of high school, I'm coming out of college. I don't give a shit about carbon vehicles. I'm going to do electric. They probably could go down a different path than what our technicians that we see today come. And they probably should go to Tesla or to a dealer to work on bolts. What do you think, Bryn?
That's what I was going to say. Is I would suspect that we, you know, in the future we may see specialized programs that are more focused, and until that gap is bridged. Like right now, we're sort of still in a transitional period. It's still a pretty small market with what's registered on the roads right now. In certain pockets, obviously higher than others. So during that transition, we might see some specialty programs. And then, you know, long term, obviously, the regular automotive programs will be investing a lot more time with hybrid EV curriculum, is my guess. So I kind of agree with that.
Awesome. Todd, you had your hand up next.
A couple things. We worked very closely with advisory committees for much of my career, and I want to reflect that most of what came from that was what Brad is discussing, that employers are looking for technicians that are employable. Certainly there was always the understanding they need to know how to be employable, like get to work on time and be reliable and things like that. So building the foundation for entry level in high school, to me, is much more the focus that I always heard about. Another thing that I would like to address is I want to clarify that I didn't mean to say anything in the least bit controversial about whether or not we should be moving into this kind of category or not. I'm looking at this more of just a sharing, and that we're headed towards the day when fossil fuels is going to be nearly phased out, maybe not entirely because of the nature of the way the United States of America is built, with a lot of space from the Mississippi River all the way to the Pacific Ocean. But that's coming. We're seeing countries where we're not going to be marketing anything but electric cars by 2035 or much sooner, or California and all those, et cetera. So to me, this is partly also about a shift in what the training of all of these people is going to look like in 5, 10, 15, 25 years. Maybe I just want to stop there.
Mike, Keith, what did you have to put in on this? Perkins.
So just for the guys that don't know, I run a mobile diagnostic business where we don't do any repair. We just do diagnosis, module programming, hybrid EV, diagnosis, just about anything that a normal shop would turn away because they have an underskilled or undertrained technician to cope with that. And I find that some of the candidates I've been looking at hiring recently, the more promising ones are the ones that have had that kind of training out of tech school. The ones that spend a lot of time doing valve grinding, engine building, that kind of stuff, lack the fundamentals to even kind of start. So seeing them kind of build the repertoire in a shop and start the ground floor and then do tires and oil change and all that stuff and kind of working up, that's a pretty traditional path, and that all of us probably have taken at some point in time, or the majority of us that are on here took that kind of path to get into the industry. But I think we're kind of seeing a shift. It's going to have to be different. I think we will see technicians come directly out of tech school and work on some of these systems. Not everyone is going to go directly to a dealership and be in a lube tech position for 2 years till they burn out or go work on forklifts because the industry's better over there. So that's something that I think as a business owner who's trying to hire technicians, and as a technician who works in the field, and I provide training and all of those things, I'm kind of got my fingers in a little bit of every part of what all of us do, and I can kind of see it from every direction. Traditionally, most technicians are lacking what they need out of tech school, but is that their fault? Is that the industry's fault? Is it what are we looking at? How do we fix this? But I would agree that I think there needs to be a heavy emphasis on EV and electric vehicles. I mean, the Prius came out in like 98, so there's a lot of them out there. That's my rant.
No worries. All right, Bren, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, so basically just kind of echoing Keith's take. I mean, there are there's depending on where they're going, they might be going to the dealership service department. They may be going to an independent service department, but there are more and more remote mobile diagnostic programming calibration companies like Keith Perkins, where we spoke about this yesterday. To a large degree, we can focus more on critical thinking, analytical skills, and being soft skills with dealing with clients in those situations, because they're dealing firsthand. Most techs coming right into the field are not, where if they were to go into a position like that, they would have more soft skills needed. But the other thing goes back to a couple of things I wanted to bring up. Anthony, one you could probably speak to is, the other thing we need to talk about is how to build upon those critical thinking, analytical skills throughout that program. The other thing that I wanted to mention is going back to something what Keith just mentioned a moment ago is, the tradition is for them to spend a couple years in high school and a couple years in college and come into the field and then push brooms and do lube services for a while. Unfortunately, we all know that there is a shortage of interest. So, clearly they can't just bypass some of that stuff. So what are some of the instructors that are on the panel, or anybody else for that matter, what are your thoughts with trying to confront the shortage? And that's one way I see it, but what's the answer to that? How do we get them maintain their interest after they enter the field without, and still be profitable as a service bay with them in there, if that makes sense?
That's awesome. Brandon, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just wanted to touch a little bit on basically what Keith was saying and a little bit about what Mike was saying here. But what I'm getting at is that I think it was Mac Vandenbrink that once said, true mastery is being able to explain your craft to a 6-year-old and have them understand it. Is it really, think about it? I mean, is a lot of it, I recall being in school and hearing things that I could almost regurgitate now, remembering my instructor saying it. But the way he said it, I don't think he even truly understood to be able to teach it to me. In other words, he was regurgitating from the book. And if I had the sense to pick apart what he was saying a little bit more, or maybe dig a little bit deeper, I'm not quite sure he could have answered me. I'm wondering, are our prospective new techs coming into the field in a position where they're learning from someone who's capable of delivering this information properly? Do they fully understand what it is they're teaching? You know, are we trying to get the kids to pass a test? Or are we truly trying to get them to understand what it is?
I was going to dig on the hot button there as well. Brad Pellman, you have your hand.
I just wanted to comment about the, you know, when we get these guys into our shop, and just to clarify, I currently on my staff right now have 3 technicians who are 2 are master level and 1 is on his way there, who started out with me as apprentices out of secondary school. And they did start in at that time my lube bay, which I don't actually do that anymore now. I have everybody do oil changes, but I started them out at that level. But the key is the shop involvement and the ownership and the mentorship that comes along with hiring that type of person. They are entry level. You have to understand that. They are, your goal is to grow them. And there is a shortage of technicians, and we need to invest our time in quality candidates when we find them, and reward them by teaching them even more and bringing them along as quickly as possible, so that they aren't pigeonholed like what happens primarily at the dealership. But you know, in our environment, yes, we want you to do brakes as soon as possible. We got to see you do it safely. We got to make you understand it. So they need that knowledge, and the more knowledge they come out of secondary with, the faster they're going to get there. That's just the honest truth. But it's the whole shop environment, it's the whole shop culture that brings that young technician along as quickly as possible. And it's not just, okay, you're the new guy, so you do the oil changes until the next new guy comes along. That's not how it works.
Awesome. Jerry Stewart.
Yeah, I agree with that last comment. And going back to what Bren was saying is, we can't take these students and put them into the lube bay and leave them there and just leave them alone and see if they pass or fail, where they're doing rotates and things like that. And what we really need is a great mentorship program. So if they're already going to school, they're already interested in this field, they're already putting the time and effort in. When they get to the shop, they need to work with somebody like a master tech that oversees them doing some higher end jobs, not just lube bay all day long. And so not that the lube bay is not a great place to learn, because it is. However, these students are already immersed in the automobile and every aspect of it. And it would be better for them to work under a mentor doing complete repairs rather than being thrown in a lube bay. That's why we're losing so many of them. They'll leave the lube bay, go to Walmart, stock shelves, because it pays more, and they can't get out of the lube bay. I mean, we do lose a lot of students that way, so we need to change that level at the shop, in my opinion. Anyways.
Jerry, that's awesome, and I'm gonna go over to Chris Martino in just a second. But there's 2 comments I wanted to pull out from the YouTube feed. Dave Osborne said, a student choosing to narrow the training to electric only may regret that choice later in such a narrow field. I think that's a very important one, but there's even a better one by Chris Goff. Should a formally trained technician coming out of one of these programs where they have 15 plus weeks of training, should they be held above the self-trained techs that are already active in the field? Chris Martino, I'm going to start off on you there.
Okay, well, Mike, the questions I have kind of respond to that. So I wanted to ask a couple questions, if you didn't mind. Brad, you own a shop. What, besides oil changes, what would you say is your most common service you provide?
The most common service we provide would be diagnosis, electronic diagnosis by far.
Okay, and what would you say would be after that?
After that, then you're doing maintenance and repair, timing belts, things like that, everyday maintenance.
Bryn, same questions.
Diagnosis for sure, because everything that comes in, we diagnose and pinpoint the cause of the concern. I'd like to do more maintenance than we do, but any repair that's related to that diagnosis. So whether it's fixing noises, drivability issues, body electrical issues, so it's hard to really answer, but diagnosis and then the general repair.
So that was getting to my point. I'm not saying putting a hybrid section in a learning program is a bad thing. However, time on doing exactly what shops are mostly doing. Diagnosis, noise, vibration, and harshness, wind noises, suspension, stuff like that. I think a stronger emphasis onto that, and then you could build into more of a hybrid training from there, because I find because the way it's going to work is you're going to go into a shop or dealership and start at the bottom. That's just how it is. And that goes to that point that was in the chat. I think Dave made it. If you try to narrow your focus so early on, you can find yourself disappointed, and then you're gonna leave the field because you're not being served by it. So I think a more well-rounded a tech would be served better by his field.
Chris, if I could just add to that, but that's that area of like, if we're going to have this youngster in our shop environment, they need that safety knowledge as a bare minimum, because you're not watching them every minute. And if you got your highest level tech over here working on a hybrid battery, and the kid walks over and goes, "What's this?" and sticks his hand in, and you're pulling him off with a 6-foot stick, you got a problem.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, minimum safety stuff. Know what the orange cables mean, and not to touch them, and don't screw a screwdriver into them. That kind of stuff. Yeah, I 100% agree.
Rich, we're ready for your 2 cents, Falco.
I want to go back to what Dave Osborne said about limiting yourself. And at least from my experience, when I got into this industry way back in the 80s, I was drawn to fuel injection and using, whatever scan tools were available back then. But there were a lot of guys in the industry going, well, there's nothing better than a quadrajet. I mean, that thing is just perfect. And it's because they were used to that technology. That's as far as they wanted to go. And those guys, I was in this industry watching those dinosaurs go extinct. So maybe, and Dave brings up a good point, it will be a great career when 51% of the cars on the road are electric. And my thinking is that might happen a lot sooner than old guys like me realize. I think that the market and what the manufacturers are putting out is going to rapidly change. And those students who are drawn to that should be pushed to it as much as possible. Obviously, they need to know everything else, but whether it's Tesla or Chevy Volts or whatever it may be, we're going to need those guys, in the future.
Yeah, Rich, I'm going to slide over to Bryn here, but I want to throw a question into the conversation here. We keep talking about when the industry gets to that point, and don't go down the political pathway here, with California pushing for this whole electric car movement in the real near future. Is this more of a key subject in certain states? Does it change state to state your viewpoint?
It does not.
Yeah, I would say, California is the largest market for new cars. So what California wants, the manufacturers are going to do. And here in Florida, where there's no emissions whatsoever, we still deal with California emissions vehicles. So as California or Europe goes, because Europe is going that way much quicker, all of the manufacturers are building global cars. We're going to be dealing with it. Regardless of the political landscape, I think we're dealing with it.
That's exactly what I was going to say too, is manufacturers have already committed to it. It's happening.
And once Tesla proved that people will buy an electric car, the rest of the manufacturers are jumping on it. I think Ford is, retooling their entire product line to be electric, or a large portion of it. So it's coming whether we like it or not.
Go ahead, Bryn.
Well, first, I was thinking as Brad was talking how much most of us, we joke about Brian and how blessed he is at his place, because he works for a great company. And as Brad was talking, I was thinking the same thing, how blessed we would be to have shop owners like Brad. And I'm thinking about my question earlier, and Jerry mentioned the mentorship thing, and that was perfect. I was thinking, how great it would be to start in a place like shops like Brad's. But unfortunately, the overwhelming majority do not operate that way. So then I started, after Jerry spoke, it dawned on me that, which reminded me of a conversation with Anthony in Vegas last year, is that I think schools have somewhat of a responsibility to help shops improve, and that might be through systems like the mentorship that Jerry was saying, which I think is awesome. Just these points, I think they're hitting me, and I just want to share them. Some of these things I've thought about, but just hearing them again tonight makes it a little clearer for me. But I wanted to talk also about Chris Groff's question, which I think was a very good point. I can speak personally to that because I didn't go to formal secondary or post-secondary automotive training at all. I always feel like that I'm still to this day playing catch up with some of the fundamental stuff that most of my colleagues that did, finish a 2 or 4 year program appear to have, at least in my conversations with them. So I think it really does, if you have two people entering the field for the very first time, I think that the person that did commit to going through formal training, I hold them. I feel like they're more valuable. Putting every consideration aside, obviously, personality, drive, and all that stuff aside.
Awesome. Todd, you have your hand up next.
There's a lot of wisdom in this group of people. I want to recognize that when you have a situation like Jerry Stewart's, where there is an apprenticeship going on that really helps bridge a gap between what can be done with the student in a learning environment like a school, whether that be high school or college, and the reality of working in a shop and producing something that has a customer attached to it. I think that is a very important link that needs to be attempted to be implemented as much as is doable. There's a lot of challenges there, and there's so many topics where we could just go around all these blocks for a long time. I would kind of like to suggest, and I realize I might be preaching to the choir, that this particular group of people stay involved in high school advisory committees. And I'm mostly picking out high school because most of what I've been hearing as far as concerns about what time in an educational career to implement hybrid and electric, high school keeps coming back. This group of people in this meeting is one of the best resources that high school teachers, high school tech program people are going to have to help guide when do we make this transition, how do we do it, do we add a class, do we combine certain aspects of electrical into an already existing situation, and all of those variables right there. And I also wanted to say I personally appreciate so many of the comments that are coming out, especially Rick with your understanding of how this is kind of a global issue, and your mention of the dinosaurs, and your mention of that we are in a transition to this situation.
Keith, you have a response you're waiting for. Go for it.
Okay, so wow, now I have a lot of responses actually. I'll try to minimize. So Martino, you had brought up that you think that we should be focusing in on most of the mechanical work. I'm going to go back over to what Todd said. I'm sorry, it wasn't Todd. I apologize there. I'm going to try to remember everybody's names here. But someone had made the mention that they are losing techs as soon as they come out, and a lot of them get out there onto the dealership lube lines, the tire guy. We do lose a tremendous amount of people that do walk out of these high school programs and then start into these dealerships or even independents. During that time that we're trying to get them trained a little bit better, they feel almost as though that training was for nothing. And I get that as a general consensus there. I see a lot of new techs that come out there in dealerships. I get to be face to face with them, and that's the first thing that I notice. And asking them, how's everything going? Are you enjoying the new job? And the first thing you see is a disgruntled look on their face. They're like, yeah, well, I did like 12 oil changes today, and then they maybe clean windows because that's customer service. And I think that that's a large part of where we do lose a lot of techs that are out there. And as far as the hybrid training goes, going back over to what Jim Kokona said, can we train our kids out there to become a technician for Tesla before they even get there? Can we give them a foundation for it? I think that's a huge part of what we have the availability to do. I don't know that that should stop in high school. I think that that's something that a high school should have a program that would be a continuing education program. So we'll allow that only for the juniors and seniors, and then go into a 2-year college program where they get they'll get a 4-year program that they can walk directly into Tesla with. So, partnering with a college would be the ideal way to do this. Geez, there's so many other things here I want to respond to as well, but I'll just keep on putting my hands up along the way. So.
Awesome. I'm actually going to throw it out to Brian, then Keith Perkins, you can follow.
Okay, I wanted to kind of extend on what Rich had said. He mentioned that when you're, as an instructor teaching for a high school or college or whatever, you notice that certain students may be better at certain areas. Should we be sending these students to certain areas to specialize and more focus those skills that we know that they're good at, rather than give them the entire 2-year curriculum that they are signed up for? That's more of a question to raise more questions.
Brent, you're next up there. I'm sorry, I get called out Keith Perkins. You could fit quietly, bud. Brent, you're up.
Really, I just want to call to attention, if anybody didn't notice, I noticed that in the chat that Richard did notice. Todd basically said that we need to be involved with the advisory committees with any secondary or post-secondary programs that are in our area. Unfortunately, we lost our post-secondary program not without a fight a couple years ago, and in my case, I've asked personally in person probably 3 or 4 times to be able to participate in the secondary programs that are in the area, but for some reason that's not come to fruition. But I think it's definitely important that we all I think many of us don't think that we have anything to offer, but I think that's the opposite's the case. Unfortunately, most of us make up the independent, and most of the time, in my experience, it's the dealerships are the only ones that are showing up to the table, and they're the one, but that also brings me to another point with these apprenticeship and mentoring programs that, like Jerry mentioned, which I think are awesome, is sometimes if you have these dealerships that are investing large sums of money and their time, the natural progression or transition is for new students to come out of those and go into a dealership field, which is not necessarily bad. But, if you don't have an apprenticeship program or mentoring program in place, it could be hard to hold them accountable for how to handle that student moving forward. The next, I think I lost my next point, so I guess I'll raise my hand again when I come with it.
Don't worry, Tommy, you had your hand up.
Well, I mean, to digress, it's a lot to take in, especially since, to be very blunt, why would anybody want to start off in this field? You get paid literally nothing. If you went to one of the, UTIs or Lincoln Techs, you're in the whole 40 grand. You need some basic tools. Let's say another couple $1,000, $3,000 at least to start, if that, maybe more, to make $12 an hour changing oil. Geez, around here you can make more probably at McDonald's now. So that's a big, to me, that's a big factor. And yeah, sometimes money isn't everything, but in terms of that wow factor, it's not as prevalent anymore. Like this generation of kids didn't really tinker with cars like we did. It's there. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the way that the industry is still perceived to this day, it's still just a bunch of grease monkeys hanging around the back, slanging parts at cars, making noise, swearing and stuff like that. So until the industry gets a complete overhaul, I don't think there's any easy solutions, in my opinion.
Nice. Rich, you're next.
I want to add on to what Tommy just said, because he's right. Yeah, we get kids into a program that love cars, Yeah, and then they go to a dealership and they get burnt out and they disappear. But and I'm going to steal something that Jim Kokonis has done at our research center. If you put a scan tool in a student's hand and you let them honk the horn or turn the lights on, and you see that light bulb go off, and that's what happened for me. I saw what I could do with that scan tool, and I went, oh, this isn't just changing spark plugs. This is cool stuff. And if that student shows an interest in electric or hybrid, then we should push them as hard as we can for that and feed that interest. And now you got somebody who's doing what he wants to do. And yeah, maybe that opening job isn't rebuilding inverters, but he's headed in that direction. And maybe isn't making the money that he wants to make, but he's already got that mindset of this is what I want to do. So yeah, a lot needs to change. Tommy's 100% correct, but we can feed that interest and keep them as excited as possible for this industry until they get to where they're making the big bucks, whenever that is.
Awesome, Brad Pellman.
Sorry, I had it muted. My wife had walked in. I just wanted to kind of refer to Tommy's comment, and I agree. It's extremely difficult for someone to come out of to your program owing 30 grand or 40 grand, whatever it is today, and walk into your shop and not have any tools, basically, and they're underwater and they're trying to get above water. And I'm just going to refer to what Jerry's program is. I mean, getting the kids involved, I call them kids, but they're probably adults at this point, getting them involved in the shop environment while they're in school. So how do you do that? That's the question I have, is how can you make that happen, where kids are able to maybe go to school for half a day, but then come to your shop for half a day? And is there a program in place where that shop owner, he's not just paying fully out of his pocket to teach that kid, he's getting some benefit, but maybe there's a program that helps fund that kid while they're learning and growing up in the system. And then maybe when they do graduate, if they are that A student and they have the ability and that shop owner already sees it, then they can step in and they're better on a path to having a financially rewarding career than the guy who comes in and is just completely underwater and nobody knows who he is from the next guy down the street. I mean, that's my comments on that. And experience trumps everything. I mean, you got a guy who's got 20 years of experience and he knows what he's doing and you can trust him. That's your A-level tech. He may or may not have gone to basic training when he was young, but he may have done training every day since then. So, and I'm in the same boat as Brent, just to be upfront. I did not go to school. I do feel like my weakness is the basics, but I don't work on cars anymore. So I work on my business. So that's my comment.
Hey, Brad, we're gonna slide over to Jim next, but I wanted to throw something out there so you can keep watching. The RMATS, the Rocky Mountain Automotive Teacher Society, is working on just that very thing right now with several different groups. So keep an eye out. I think I have an email out to you already on how to build a road to great technicians and be able to supplement that startup to get them into the garage while they're still learning. So we do have an answer coming for that. Jim, you're up next.
Okay, I've been throwing my hand up a couple of times and wanting to respond. I've got some notes in my head. Let me try and run down through these. I hope people don't misunderstand. I wasn't saying we needed an electric only program. I guess what was in my head, the mental picture is, don't get stuck on where we come from. Not every one of us took the same path. We're hearing it as people talk tonight. I didn't need a 2-year automotive program to learn the basics, and I didn't need an automotive bachelor's degree to know the basics. I I took an academic curriculum in high school. I never went through VOTEC. And then I took basically a 1-year program from Nashville Auto Diesel. And when I came out of Nashville Auto Diesel, my first job was working in a fuel injection shop. I rebuilt pumps, turbos, and injectors. So I had the logic and the study of science and mathematics and critical thinking and reading comprehension. I had all that out of high school. I didn't need to be taught that through a program. I just give me information. I'm not going to come out of that an expert, and I didn't by any means. But I guess what I'm trying to challenge everybody to look at is, just because some of us came through a model doesn't mean it's the only model. That model worked for me. My second job was working on a 9,000 acre farm on anything from weed eaters to hillside combines. I learned to weld and drive a tractor trailer. Did any of that scare me? No, because I had the foundations and the basics. And so I guess, I listen to people talk about, oh, the experienced technician, that's our diagnostic guy. And I've challenged people before. Look at the young guy coming out of school who's never had an 8-track, who's never even had a cassette. And he started off with more advanced video games than we did, and he's real comfortable with that. Maybe that's the guy that you start to cut his teeth on diagnostics. He doesn't need to know how to pull the transmission out and rebuild it, but he's the one who can tell you what's wrong inside. So I guess I'm just saying, blow things up a little bit, and then we can rethink how we train to it. Anthony, the first time you and I met, what was the conversation we had?
Oh, I don't know. I've slept since then.
Things are taught in silos. Things are taught in silos, and we never relate how this topic over here is the same as that topic over there. It's just the details are different. And we've had those conversations over the years now repeatedly. And so we're talking about, where does hybrid and electric fit? And a lot of us think it's something different. And sometimes what we just need to think is, it's another node on the network.
Awesome.
We already know networks. Go.
Bryn, you're going to be up next, but there's 2 questions that I want to throw out to keep going in the group as well. One from the panel was, what do you do to keep the interest of kids in hybrid electric vehicles if all we teach is safety? Does anyone do a program like building electric go-karts for racing or something to that effect? And then I'll throw in the next question after you guys mull that one over. Bryn, it's up on you.
So the first question is, like I mentioned in the beginning, I think of it in terms of integration, which is, I think, similar to what Jim was just saying. It's every system on the vehicle has things that are similar, and Richard mentioned it as well. Hybrid and electric vehicles have very similar systems as a regular automobile. So if we're focusing on safety, I don't think anybody here is saying that we can't teach anything else about hybrid or electric vehicles. I think that as shop owners, we just want to make sure that they can actually do simple maintenance on them, at least in the early stages, because they understand how to work safely. A couple of points I just want to make, and they're just coming to me, which I think is great about this platform. We really didn't have any notes, really, so to speak, beforehand. We just had kind of a outline, which is probably clear to many of you. But so these are really more challenges, and I think going back to the challenge of participating in advisory committees, I think is important for other reasons. One is, we need to make sure that we have instructors that are passionate, and so that might start with technicians that are passionate, which is very much what Trained by Techs tries to do, is to try to breathe life into technicians and make sure that they're career minded and be proud and happy for what they do. So if we're doing that and those technicians are participating in advisory committees, they can potentially breathe life into those instructors that are already there. Maybe it's a very difficult job. It's a labor of love. So breathe life into them, and in the long term, those technicians that are in advisory committees, some of them are going to most likely transition into being passionate instructors as well. So that's part of it. The other part is, for those, another challenge for those of you that are in programs is to become a leader if you're not already in the programs, and consider helping to to lead your other instructors or other colleagues into considering everything that goes into it. I know that for most of us that aren't involved, we don't really understand that there's marketing involved with teaching secondary and post-secondary programs. There's politics. There's a lot of soft skills. There's so much that's to it, I think. So if you're in a position in a program like that, consider becoming a leader and helping the rest of your colleagues with that. And the last point I want to make is, with these mentorship and apprenticeship programs, I think they're brilliant, but let's not get stuck on the fact that only a master tech is going to be in the position to do it. Chris Chesney actually mentions this at least at one time. I remember he said, you really get, as a shop owner or as a foreman, whatever, in your shop, make sure that you do some research and start to understand what makes a good mentor, as opposed to just throwing a technician to a master tech that may be grumpy and just feels like everybody's after their dollar, if that makes sense.
Awesome. All right, Brandon, you're waiting here. You're next.
And I'm sorry, I'm going back a little bit, but just talking a little bit about how people learn and stuff. I just want to make a point. I mean, how many of us did well in school? I'm talking about high school and things like that growing up. I did great. I happened to get straight A's, and it's just because I enjoyed school, but I happened to just absorb everything I was reading and things like that. And I paid attention. But when I got out in the field, I thought I was going to excel, and I didn't do bad, but I was progressing at a snail's pace. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't being told what to do. I didn't realize at the time that it was up to me to maintain my education and continue learning. I mean, as long as I do what my boss needs me to do, I get the job done. I guess from some shop owners' aspects, that's all that really matters. But for me to progress as a technician, I had to take the time, and I wasn't realizing it when it was so important. So I tell people often that I probably wasted at least the first 5 years of my career. I think I should be light years ahead of where I am now because of all that wasted time in the beginning. So I think a lot of these young up and coming technicians may not realize that it's up to them to put forth the effort to want to learn. Whether we're talking about hybrid electric vehicle platforms or any type of vehicle. I wanted to just point that out. I think it's important that we let them realize that early on.
That's awesome, Brandon. Todd, I'm going to go to you in just a second, but I want to pull out two things that are in the chat here. One was, do we need to teach something as easy as tires and brakes and oil changes first then, or should we commit to training the electronic system earlier? Why not tackle the hard areas of learning first? And the next one actually goes really well with this, and I'm going to throw in my 2 cents in the hat because I'm controlling the mic. The other one was a response to Keith. The building of projects and maybe even RC vehicles could be part of a program. We can cover electric, fuel, brake, suspension, and perhaps even ADAS with an immersive project. Some of you guys know about the school project that I'm still working on getting off the ground. But in this conversation of talking about hybrids and bringing in the danger of hybrids, electricity to electricity is electricity, and we should teach three-phase. Somebody had said it online that there's other things that use three-phase on a car before you even get to hybrid. So are any of you guys playing around with the idea of using a smaller prototype like a go-kart and introducing electric vehicles through a go-kart? Because you can still have suspension, steering, alignment. You can still get into even scientific principles, gravity, force, things like that. So roll that one around as well. And Todd, you're next.
Very nice. I wanted to tell Tommy that I relate to what he said. We always have that challenge, however, so we just got to figure out how we're going to deal with it. And to some point, we need to also understand there's always a pendulum that swings back and forth in terms of the pay, the demand, and all of that. Bryn, I wanted to address something you said that concerned me slightly, and it was a comment you made about dealers, as if somehow maybe the dealers have all the power in these types of situations. In the 90s, we worked for 6 years very hard to put in an AS program in my area, and one of the things I told the AS rep initially was I was happy to initiate an AS program at our school, but that I wanted to make that available to the independents just as much as dealerships. I wasn't going to cater only to the dealerships. Our school serves everybody. It's a public institution. And what ended up being discovered in our location, at least, was we had a lot better support and participation from the private independent shops than we'd had from the dealers. And we worked so hard at that, and we had so much more support. So what I want to tell you in terms of I don't know if it's your way of thinking, or if, Bryn, you're in a private shop that you don't have experience outside that, I don't know. But I want you to know you have some of that power there, and that you can do a lot for your community and all of those et ceteras by being involved. On this same topic, I wanted to say that in terms of getting a little bit back to what Tommy had shared as a concern, when you do an apprentice program, there is often the availability of funding for tools and things of that nature that can really benefit someone who's up and coming. And then I know Anthony mentioned some other possibilities that we're putting together with RMAT, so keep your eyes peeled and your ears open for that. Another thought that I had with all this discussion going on is, as people are coming through high school programs, there are these points in time where you can see this person or these people are in an electrical class, this third of them is really just marching in place. They're earning D's or C's. These people are earning C's and B's. These people are really sharp. You can use that. You can use something as simple as which students understand what voltage drop really is and why it happens and why it exists and what it means. And then start to identify who those people are. And those are the kinds of people that you can light a fire under, that there is a whole entire career world that is available to the people who have those understandings and those skills. From some of this discussion, maybe Brian Stickler was one of the people who probably really shined back in the day in that kind of particular category.
Awesome, Todd. Keith, it's yours, and it's Brandon Steckler. And I don't know if he's ever been really shiny. I'm just kidding with you, bud. Love you, man. Go ahead, Keith.
So I'm going to try to bounce around and comment back on things because there's a lot of us. But I would to not disagree, but to disagree with Brad. Sorry, but I don't think that tenured in years has a whole lot to do with the EV situation at this point. I think a technician that's worked for 20 years is not always the best diagnostician. Take it from someone who my entire last quite a few years in the industry now have been to go from shop to shop and diagnose vehicles that shops were unable to diagnose or have spent too much time. And unfortunately, the mindset and thinking type of individuals that did really good at working on vehicles in the last 20 years is not the type of person we need now. It's not the personality that we need now to work on vehicles. Critical thinking skills and having just a solid foundational understanding of systems knowledge is what fixes cars today. So I don't think that the long tenured in years quite means as much. Experience is huge, but I think that experience can happen very short as well. Like I diagnose 6 to 8 cars a day. I think I probably diagnose more than most technicians do in a week, maybe a month. So my experience with these things equates to a much more amount of experience if you were to weigh it in grams or something. Than someone who has a longer tenured year than I do as a technician. But that's just certain things. But when we talk about these EV systems, that's kind of where we have to go. They're usually point, click, shoot when it comes to what's wrong with the system. But once you step outside of that and you have to think outside the box, it's a little different. And then, like, to complement what Jim said, on my comment, I said we all kind of came from a similar thing or a similar structure, and I really meant the other people in here, not myself. I didn't come from a normal structure to automotive at all. I was in other totally different fields, sold parts for a little while, and then just decided I could do this, and I could. And it wasn't because I was exceptional at anything. I wasn't very good in school. I almost flunked. I had to go to night school. I wasn't really super exceptional at anything, but I worked harder than everyone else. So, discipline equals freedom is something that I've kind of tried to spend a lot of time doing. It's a Jocko Willink thing that he says, and to have that discipline in training yourself and pushing yourself, even as a young student, I was able to jump into the field pretty young and then excel very quickly. And that was because I disciplined myself to be better. And like I said, it wasn't because I was gifted with anything special. I just worked harder. And I think there's a lot of students that can do that right out of school. So if we give them that opportunity, give them the opportunity to learn that and to train that in school, then they can get there quickly. They can build that experience.
That's a very good point, Keith. That's pretty awesome. Mike, you're up, bud.
You hear me?
Yep.
All right. Got a couple things, but one is I think the skills that are needed need to come through high school and the trade school as much as possible because the amount of technicians we don't have enough technicians in the field that are skilled enough to train the incomers. So it's going to be critical to have them understand not only the electrical side, but even some of the mechanical side. I mean, how often are you going to do brakes on a hybrid? Yeah, you need to know how that system works, but they also need to know the technology side of it.
What are you seeing currently in the field, Mike? Because you go shop to shop, so what are you seeing with new people in the field?
They at wide range. Almost most of the ones that I see, if it is a hybrid vehicle, they lack the skill of even.
I'm trying my best to keep it around a minute and a half. I've been pushing it because you guys have had some really good conversations.
Oh no, I'm not complaining about time. There's
I'll
been
help
so
you,
many
Rich.
points that have gone by here.
It's called menopause.
I'll help you out, Rich.
Go ahead, Keith.
Rich was going to address the idea that I was asking, which should be learned first.
Oh yeah, you're right. Wow, you actually are 100% correct there.
It's hell getting old.
A couple of things here. Hans Jorgensen made an awesome point that this industry is the ultimate STEM program. I mean, one of the tough things, and I dealt with this at my tech school, is we still have guidance counselors coming into my program and going, well, he's not really good with books, so I figured maybe he'd be good with his hands. And I'd hand them the automotive book and go, just pick any page and read it and tell me if this kid should be doing this. We need to attract the right people, and then we need to train them right, which brings to what Keith was saying. My first advisory meeting for my school was all dealerships, and there were 6 dealerships, and every single one had the same complaint. Why do we have to retrain your guys to do tires? Why do we have to retrain your guys to mount and balance tires? Because as Jim said, they were taught in a silo. Well, we do oil changes and tire mounting and balancing in the first semester, and then we never address it again. So 2 years go by, the kid graduates, and he's thrown in a lube rack. He's done one oil change 2 years ago. So, yeah, the whole program needs to change, and they need to be exposed to everything. I'm going to pick on my program again. Most students didn't touch a scan tool until they were 75% done with the program. And for students, high school and adult students of this age, they're so familiar with the technology. You don't have to teach them a scan tool. Put the thing in their hand. They're familiar with touchscreens. So that stuff should be added early, and those things that they're going to need, as Brad and a couple other guys have said, that those skills that they need, tires, oil change, the basics, should be taught as they go through the program, along with everything else. And that's what I'm saying from the very start. We can throw hybrid in there and add it to your curriculum. I'm not so sure we have to separate it into a separate program, because they're still brakes. It's just they're slightly different, and there's still suspension, and maybe that's changed a little bit. But then we add the batteries and everything else that goes along with it, and that can be added to the electrical section or whatever it may be. So this hybrid EV stuff can be added to what we already have.
Rich, that's actually a very good point. I love that the conversation's gone around breaking the silos, and I'm hoping that that's being heard across the board, that we shouldn't be teaching in silos because it's a repetition that's missing before they go in the field. And that's why the shops have to keep putting them back on the lube rack to reteach something that they learned 2 years ago. So next up is Brad. Brad, you have the mic, bud.
Hey, so I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to answer a couple of things. And I'll start, Keith. I think you just kind of missed what I was saying about the experienced technician. What I was adding there at the end, and I know I talk kind of fast, is, you know, when I say experience, I'm also referring in this conversation to somebody who still believes in training. They're still going to training and they're still learning. So they're still actively involved in and interested in today's technology. I understand what you're saying. I have a technician on my staff who is old school and doesn't want to learn anymore. He's almost done, and he knows it. Jerry, younger techs more conditioned to continuous learning. I think you're right. Our younger kids that come in, you know, the way they come into us now, they're more open to continually learning, looking at the internet for information and continuing to learn as they go, and they know how to go out and find that information. And they seem to be much more willing to understand that their career path is going to be learning all the way through, and kind of growing with technology, because that's how they grew up was with technology. And Todd, the dealers having the power in, I think, primarily in the secondary education field, it's because they participate. You know, as speaking from the chair of ASA, when I was in that seat, what I learned was, yes, they get priority at those schools like Lincoln Tech and stuff, but it's because they're there. They put themselves there. They support. They make a point of having draft days where they go in and they meet the students. And a lot of our shop owners in our small businesses don't put themselves in a position where they feel like they can leave their businesses to go and do that and spend that time, which is actually investing in themselves. So that's my comment there.
Awesome. Jerry, I'm going to throw a question in before you're up, Jerry Stewart. And the question was given out for the teachers, so this falls right in your category here. By adding hybrid and EV to curriculum, what do you feel can be removed from the current one, or do you need more time with the kids? And that's students, because if my console lab friends are here, they're going to yell at me for saying kids out loud. I was reading. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, to address your question first, so I don't forget it at the end, what we did is shorten up everything so that we could insert it in there. So less time with every subject, basically, so that we could get it inserted in there. And as far as going back and addressing some of the things that was said earlier, somebody said, maybe we should teach the harder classes first. And I'm thinking they're thinking electrical, teach that first. If the students were in a cocoon and in a learning environment, that's the only thing they ever had to do, and they weren't getting out in the shops, it would be very good to go to electrical 1 first. And we've tried that. And what happens is, because electrical is used in everything, whether it's brakes, steering, suspension, I don't care what it is, engines, transmissions, electrical is used across the board. However, if you try to start them out into electrical, and you don't get their fingers to work and their hand dexterity, and you don't get them to be able to rotate tires and do those kind of tasks, then when you do send them to the shops, they send them back. And it's a terrible thing. It doesn't work at all, okay? So we do what we call a boot camp. So we run them through and they do 10 struts. I mean, they literally take 10 struts apart, put them back together. They take struts on and off the cars. They do rotations, one right after the other. They do inspections. I have every inspection of every dealer and aftermarket shop in my area. They learn how to inspect the car. They learn how to do all the oil changes, all the fluid changes. So I get them work ready. Then they go to work. But we do it a little differently. We run 2 shifts at school. I literally start my first shift at 6:30 at school. And we get the kids in and they go a half a day. and then the other kids come in the afternoon. So my kids are there in the morning. They work in the afternoon. The other kids work in the morning and come in the afternoon. So the shop always has a person there. So the shop gets 2 interns. So they get 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. So we split our shifts. And it also helps our shop. I don't have the whole other curriculum in there trying to rob my shop time. So when I'm in the shop, the other part is not in the shop. They're working. So it frees our shop up to do more work that way. So that works. And then I think it was Tommy that says, why would anybody come into this field? And I would agree with that to a certain extent, but I want to really strongly disagree as well, because when you go to work at McDonald's, say, well, they pay a little bit more. Well, we made a deal with our dealerships and aftermarket shops that if you hire one of our kids, and they actually have to hire 2 of them per year, that's part of their agreement. And so we have an agreement with 12 shops, and they hire 2 students per year. And so they have to pay them $16 an hour starting out, and they're guaranteed raises if they keep them. And I'm talking about keeping them through the year. So if they're really bad, they send them back, or we take them back, whatever. But we very rarely see that. So they're guaranteed raises. And then let's just pick Chrysler. When they go to Chrysler, Chrysler has a dedicated path from $16 an hour to $30 an hour. They know if I take this test and I get this certification and I'm able to do this job, I keep progressing 16, 18, 20, 22, all the way to 30. And a lot of our students have graduated up to point they're making over 50 grand a year. Some of them are close to 100 grand a year as a technician. So I can't do that at Walmart. I can't do that at McDonald's. I have a growth on this side. So that's why I would like to go into the business. And then back to one other comment, somebody said, well, I'm going to throw them on those demeaning jobs. And I get that. They're new. But we have some shops that literally hire our students because they have nobody in the shop that can run a lab scope or a mega ohm meter or milliohm meter or do any hybrid work whatsoever. So our kid, when a hybrid comes in, gets to do the whole thing because nobody there has ever even seen a mega ohm meter. So there's different ways of looking at it, and every piece of the puzzle fits differently in everybody else's market. But I just wanted to address some of the things I heard as we went along there. One more thing, the high school instructors, for a lot of times, are not really sending people to us. We don't have a good path from high school into post-secondary. They get them in for 50 minutes. They do whatever they do. They leave, and they don't really think about the automotive industry. I actually, for 3 years in a row, invited every high school instructor of the state to come to my school for training, and I would get 5 or 6 high school instructors to show up. It's really hard to engage the high school instructors and pull students out of them. They just, I don't know, that's missing. That's a gap that we have.
You did it wrong. If you don't mind me saying, you did it wrong. So the way to make that work is you send a bus there to pick up the students directly from the high school and with their parents' permission. That's what you do. You get a list from those teachers of the kids that are in that school, and you go ahead and you get a bus together and you bus them in. For the amount of what it's going to cost you for a bus to bring those kids out there for a day, and the amount that you'll make in the addition of tuition, even for 2 kids, you're good to go. Sorry, I had to interject.
We actually do send the bus out, and we do bus students in as well. We go that route as well. We're pretty aggressive on what we do for recruiting.
All right, Jerry, I'm going to let Bryn slide in there. I broke my rule because you were on a roll there, and I think you answered some really important questions. But Bryn, you're up, bud.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I took the opportunity to kind of, sometimes when I don't necessarily explain myself well enough. So to Todd's point, when I was speaking about advisory committees, and power was probably the poor choice of words, but in my experience in the programs that I was involved with, there wasn't hardly any independent support. It was almost all dealers. So I guess the main thing, if anything, I just want to make sure that the takeaway from what I say is that we need to get involved with the advisory committees, and don't feel like I think technicians too, and just passionate people need to get involved. Don't feel like you don't have anything to offer, because most of the time you do. What I see oftentimes in business classes is, especially recruitment classes, when we talk about hiring and retention of your team, we're taught to look at these opportunities as a way to recruit for your business. And it's not necessarily, I think it needs to be looked at the other way around. I think we need to look at these opportunities as opportunities to help people and help the industry. And I think in return, then those relationships will help us to make sure that we have opportunities for recruitment for our team. But again, I just don't want to I want to make sure it wasn't, that I'm not viewed as a negative side. I don't mean that, and not every program I'm sure operates that way. That's just been my experience. So I think, again, in my experience, there wasn't enough independent involvement. We need to make sure that we get involved.
That's an awesome message, and that goes for everybody that's listening out on the YouTube world as well. One thing to take away from all this is that as technicians and shop owners, please join an advisory committee. Educators, sometimes we're out of the field for quite some time, sometimes a decade, 2 decades. We've got some teachers and RMATs that have been out of the field for longer than I've been born. So make sure to get back to it. I do want to stir the pot a little bit back to Brad's comment about putting them on the lube rack, because that's where they start. That's the idea everywhere. That's where they get put. It doesn't make a difference. Even dealerships tend to do that, and that's one of the things that we get pushed back. And we're working. So thinking about the hybrid idea, what can educators do? What do you want to see us provide them if we have a large hybrid program like Jerry does, Arapahoe Community College does as well? What can the educators do to help that student start off and get their feet wet in your shop faster, so they're not stuck on a lube rack? While you're thinking about that, though, I saw Rich Falco. Did you have your hand up on that? Did you have your hand up?
I was going to add on to what Bryn said, which was, at my technical school, it was only dealerships that showed up to the advisory committees. So the dealerships basically cherry picked the students and they directed the curriculum. So we need to get involved. And we also need to get involved with those instructors, because some of the instructors look at an advisory committee meeting as just a formality to get out of the way. They take zero input. They're going to teach what they teach. And I think the more we get involved and the more we push back on some of this dated stuff that they're teaching, the more we're going to help the students. That's and the local businesses and the dealerships and whoever it is. So yeah, we need to get more involved. I thought that was a great point.
And that's kind of what I was, referring to as far as breathing life back into, because it's such a difficult job. There's so much to it that people don't understand. And, I think they're getting, I don't know, they're getting beat up. I think a lot of instructors get beat up and they just get tired. So as technicians, especially, or in shop owners are natural. I mean, like I mentioned a moment ago, to kind of back up my point was, a lot of shop owners don't look at it as they don't participate because they only look at it as a possibility of recruitment. And they're not the same position as dealerships. You have a bigger staff model and there's more rotation. We won't get into the reasons why. But it's, most independent shops don't have that same need. So if they're looking at it as a recruitment opportunity, they don't really see a benefit in them. So that's why I say, really, it needs to be, you look at it as an opportunity to help others and help the industry. And but to your point, Richard, it's about breathing life into some instructors too. And, if you're career minded and passionate about it and you bring that to the advisory committees, and be positive and proactive, and I think it can be helpful. But Anthony, you mentioned how we're able to keep new recruits from basically losing interest as they enter the field.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the questions I brought on earlier, is that we're hearing about that, and we've kind of spoken to that a little bit. So many, retention is a problem. Acquisition's a problem, but retention is a problem as well. And I think the answers are, and Jerry, you're again a good point. Um, you know, we talked about, can we fast track them into diagnostic positions? Because in a lot of cases, you might not need to have a heck of a lot of experience in order to, because we call it button pushing, basically. If you're doing front seat diagnostics using a scan tool, oscilloscope, or whatever, we don't need a heck of a lot of R&R experience, but we do need experience in systems and understanding how systems, function and how they work. So as far as fast tracking, I think going back to what Keith was saying, I think it was Keith Perkins, you were mentioning, if instructors recognize that interest and drive, then we kind of, and Richard as well, we kind of make sure that we recognize that our instructors do, and that they support and continue to push them in that direction. But there still needs to be that core curriculum, in my opinion, as a shop owner for that matter. To Keith's point, DeFazio's, we talk about this a lot as well. I think it's not immediate. I think it's usually, in his exact example, he spent his own money, his own time going to training. First of all, he shouldn't, but whatever, reality is that happens, and it will continue to happen. How do we retain those types, the ones that have earned their place as a diagnostic technician, one that doesn't have to R&R water pump often? I think there's, the immediate response is there's not a lot of independent shops, especially, that can support that model. But I'm not sure that that's true. My shop is small. We have 2 production technicians, but we sell so much diagnostics, like Brad was saying. Everything that comes in is a problem, with the exception of maintenance. Somebody's bringing it in because they just want their routine maintenance done or their scheduled maintenance done. Everything else comes in with a problem or a customer concern that we have to pinpoint accurately. So if more business owners approach it in that way and actually charge for diagnosis and all of those, don't take a quick look at it and tell me what's wrong with it. No, actually pinpoint the problem. Then we will have more independent shops that can support a diagnostic technician, one that doesn't have to do, because it's a real problem. We do have some of our top guys that are being moved over to other fields because it's real. The other part of it too is, as shop owners, we can look at those, if we don't have enough to support them fully diagnostics, we can look at those guys as being the IT guys in the company, making sure that the laptops and the scan tools are up to date, being in a position to mentor the other guys in some cases. So there's a lot of things you can do, repurpose that diagnostic technician if your shop can't full-time, support a diagnostic technician.
And that's awesome. Brad, I'm going to let you wrap up this conversation. I'm excited to see your face. That's going to go lit up, and I was like, woo, yay, all right, we got something here. So Brad, take us home. Wrap us up in this conversation here.
I probably shouldn't even comment, but a bomb was dropped about flat rates, so I'm going to just say something about it. So, it's a great idea. Wouldn't it be great if we could pay everybody the fee that they're worth based off of their education level and their ability? But the problem with that strategy is that then each individual works to their level of comfort, not necessarily to the level that's needed for the company to be successful. And that's a very dangerous position to be in. And most shop owners need productivity from their production staff, which is their technicians. And the encouragement is to put a carrot in front of them. And you can build payment plans that encourage them to make even more money than they would make if they were paid just a hourly wage. If they work hard and are successful and they train themselves and they believe in themselves, they'll be successful in that position, in my opinion. And I think if you went to your most successful technicians, the one that make $100,000 a year, they would turn down the offer to pay me a flat wage over getting paid flat rate. And that's my comment.
If I
Chris,
could,
Chris, hold on, go ahead, Chris.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm going to strongly disagree with you, Brad. I have never worked on flat rate in my life, and I would refuse to work at any shops. In fact, I've turned down a few jobs that have offered to pay me in flat rate. I would say if your comments, if you're going to say that the tech wouldn't be, they're going to work at their pace, then you're hiring the wrong techs. I have one speed. That one speed is get the job done as fast and as correct as possible, period. And honestly, when I had a shop, because I too was a shop owner, I hired like-minded people and paid them a fair wage and what they were worth. Now, as far as making the magical $100,000 mark, before I left the shop, I was almost there. If I would have stayed working there, stayed working at different shops, I would have eventually been there. I find that flat rate technicians, the ones that I've dealt with, know how to game the system, and they work on gaming the system. And they're at the mercy of the people selling the work, and that's not fair. I do the best job I can, no matter what it is, whether it's an oil change or brake job or a full-on CAN bus diagnostic. I try to get done as fast as possible because I work as if my name is on the building, because that's how I am, and I feel that those are the people that you should be hiring.
Oh,
that's great, except for there's not that many of those people out there. You're like the diamond in the rough if you are what you say you are. But I don't know you, so I can't ask I don't know if you've ever owned your own shop or not.
Yes.
Yes,
I have.
But why don't you still own it then?
Because I'm a horrible businessman. I'm an amazing mechanic, but I'm a horrible businessman.
I currently own my own. I currently own my own, and I pay hourly.
So I will say this, guys. I want to put a pin in this real quick.
I think we're inside.
We're running onto the 7 hour. If you guys want to keep going on it, I think we can have a whole roundtable on flat rate versus hourly, and to see YouTube fired up as well as much as you guys fired up here.
Stay tuned for next week.
Yeah,
YouTube is on fire right now.
Throw it on for next week. I want to thank you guys because we are wrapping up the hour here, and so I want to just recap real quick. The meat in the middle is that we should be teaching at least safety of hybrid. And if I say something completely off kilter, jump in and smash it down here. High school and secondary should at least be teaching safety because that's key. They may come across a hybrid without knowing it, and well, we don't want anything bad to happen.
They teach it to firefighters. Why wouldn't we teach it to the kids?
I love that. So maybe that's even a baseline. Is what do first responders need to know? Maybe that's what we should make sure that our secondary and post-secondary at least know. If you don't have a hybrid program, at least be able to introduce those things. If you do have a hybrid program, I'm hearing that they're still going to go into the shop. They may not jump into a hybrid vehicle or into a bay with hybrid, but with a little bit more training, if it's provable and if you have a connection with that shop, you may be able to demonstrate those skills to move them along a little bit faster. But they're still going to start where everybody else starts, which is the lube bay. Is that fair enough? Is that kind of the consensus that I heard across the board?
I think the second point is, bare minimum safety, but also in each automotive system where you can talk about hybrid technology within that system. I think that's bare minimum. Even if you don't have a specific hybrid EV program, you can talk about, with brakes, you can talk about regenerative braking, like someone else had mentioned. So when with electrical, you can talk about, you know, three-phase AC, and mention how that, you know, works with modern fuel pumps, but also how it works with hybrid EV vehicles. And, you know, we talk about batteries and starting and charging systems. We can talk about how, you know, hybrids and EVs don't have a traditional alternator or starter. This is how they do it, you know. So I think it's bare minimum safety, but also the integration with hybrid EV subjects within your normal systems, even if you don't have a hybrid EV program. And I so badly want to just say one thing about business, but if you won't let me, I won't.
I think let's wrap this one up. I think
Let
you
it
guys,
go. Okay.
Yeah, you guys should hold on to those punching gloves though, because I think that would still be a good conversation. I'll set it the fly on the wall on that one. But okay, so a good wrap up there is that they should be integrating, so showing where the changes will happen when they do get into hybrid. I'd like to point out, so Jerry's pointed out one thing with his program that I think for all the teachers listening in on this, that I would like to see more across all the programs, is that his hybrid program is for when they complete their traditional program, they can enter, or if they're in the field and they need additional training, they can go back for hybrid. So that way a shop like Brad's, who encourages training, can have somewhere to send them so he can build a hybrid technician who's already gone through the ranks and had some experience so that they don't mess something up. Is that kind of a fair nugget to throw out there?
I think that's a great comment. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. On that, I'm done talking for the night. So TBT, you guys can wrap it up. Do what you do to end us. We got 3 minutes until the bell, so I'm done.
Well, again, Anthony, thank you so much for allowing us to host and participate. And this was a really awesome conversation, really great minds. I think everybody, whether they're watching and participating in the chat tonight or whether they watch it in the future, which is awesome. For those of you that are watching in the chat, please share it with everybody that you know, because I think it's relevant to everyone, and in the industry, obviously, or education or whatever. So please share it. Thank you again, Anthony. Thank you for all the panelists that came on tonight. Great points throughout tonight, and we didn't have to put punching gloves on that, so that's pretty awesome. Thank you guys so much. Some of us will probably linger around a little while, so you're more than welcome to hang out if you like, but this kind of concludes our panel discussion.
All right, guys, I'm putting the kids to bed. Good night.
Good night. Well, you're hosting, so when you go away, what is that?
Oh, wait, I better get that back, shouldn't I?
Somebody will be the host eventually.